G'day groovers, rockers and in between. This is Vinyl Vibes. I'm your host, Jack Hodgins. Today we are talking with drummer of Looking Glass, Jeff Grob. Jeff first heard rock and roll on a car radio in the 50s and it captured him like no other music before. After playing in various groups while in high school, Jeff's psychology teacher had put him in contact with a band from Rutgers University. This band was called Looking Glass and Jeff would soon become their drummer. In the early 70s, the band would begin making demos in a rented farmhouse before being signed to CBS Records. Although the band's first single was unsuccessful, the band's second single would forever secure their place in music history. Brandy, You're a Fine Girl would see the band reach number one in the United States and today remains a classic. Looking Glass would go on to release 2 studio albums before disbanding in 1974. Jeff continued doing music and today is playing in a band called Stars and is still doing gigs playing the music of Looking Glass. G'day Jeff and welcome to Vinyl Vibes.
Let's have a little chat. What do you say?
Well, I just wanted to start at the beginning. What can you tell me about your childhood?
I was born at a very early age at a hospital because I wanted to be near my mom. I can tell you, I sang in boys' choir in church as a kid. I can remember the first rock and roll record I ever heard. It was Let's Go to the Hop by Danny and the Juniors. I can remember always wanting to listen to music and wanting to understand how to play music. I was playing piano lessons when I was about 7 or 8 maybe. I switched to playing the drums in the grade school band. I made my first set of drums out of, I got a snare drum from my grandfather, and then I made the rest of my set of drums out of some packing crates that I had we moved. I built a bass drum pedal myself out of wood and springs and leather strap. And then from there it just went on. My father said, "Well, it looks like he wants to play the drums." So I got a small used kit, and we rented it because he didn't know if I was going to stick with it or not. And then in 3 months, when the rental was up, I already had played that so much and saved with my own money, bought myself a floor tom to go with it, and started playing in bands and went on after that.
Because you mentioned there too, the first rock and roll record you heard by Danny and the Juniors there. I mean, would you say that was that a big moment for you hearing rock and roll for the first time?
Well, it was. I didn't know quite what the hell is this? You know, I was in the back seat of the car. We were driving into New York for something. I don't know. And it came on the radio and it just like I went, whoa. The hell is that, right? And from then on, I realized that the whole world is not Perry Como and Patty Page.
Yeah. Well, in saying that too, because because I read too that I think it was your high school psychology teacher that set you up with your first band. Am I right on that?
Playing in real bands already by then. It was the band that ultimately became Looking Glass. I met some of the guys by a connection through my high school psychology teacher. But I was in bands before for years. By the time I was 16 years old, I was already playing 3 nights a week in bars. I was only a sophomore in high school when I started playing like real gigs like that.
So was that Looking Glass you joined in high school, or was that a different band?
It was a precursor to Looking Glass. Looking Glass there was 2 iterations of Looking Glass. Looking Glass 1, we'll call it, was a college campus band at Rutgers in New Brunswick, and it was Elliot Lurie on guitar, Larry Gonski on piano, Peter Sweevel played rhythm guitar, and they had a different bass player and a different drummer. And they were one of the 2 big bands on campus. The other big band was Lenny Kaye, and Lenny Kaye wound up being a guitar player with Patti Smith. But there were 2 really, fairly decent bands on campus. Looking Glass 1 broke up because Elliot and Larry wanted to go play more lucrative engagements. They left to go play, lounges and bars and stuff because they wanted to get some money. And so Peter, the bass, who was the rhythm guitar player at the time, wanted to form a power trio like Cream or Jimi Hendrix or that kind of stuff. And this is where the recommendation from my psychology teacher comes in. He had just graduated Rutgers, and early in the fall semester, when I started that class as a senior in high school, we were talking because it was the last class of the day, and we stay after class, and we were talking about music. He says, "Oh, I got some friends down in New Brunswick that are looking for a drummer. Are you interested?" I go, "Yeah." So I got Peter's number, and I threw my drums in the back of my father's car and drove down to New Brunswick and brought them upstairs 4 floors in a tenement and set them up, and we just jammed for a couple of hours on really heavy hard rock blues and that kind of stuff. And at the end of that, he says, "Hey, well, you want to be in a band?" And I said, "Well, yeah." So by then, Peter had switched to bass. He already had a lead guitar player that was very similar to playing guitar like the guy that was in Quicksilver Messenger Service, John Cipollina. He already had a lead singer who played some rhythm guitar and a harmonica, and they were looking for a drummer. So that band formed. That band was called Tracks, and we just formed and started playing gigs. We played all around the Brunswick campus. We played. By then, I graduated high school, and that summer, I played all up and down the Jersey Shore. My band and Bruce Springsteen's band would play, once a month together at various shore gigs and stuff. And that went on for about a year or so. Finally, Elliot and Larry couldn't take playing the kinds of gigs that they were doing. And in Trax's case, the lead singer went and joined another band that was getting a record deal. So Peter met up with Larry and Elliot one day, and Elliot or Larry said, "Hey, you think you want to get Looking Glass back together?" Peter says, "Yeah, sure." So he brought me over to what we now call Looking Glass Part 2 or Phase 2, and it was Larry, Elliot, Peter, and myself. And what we originally thought we wanted was to have a band, neither Elliot, who was the lead singer, one of the lead singers in Looking Glass, or Peter, who was also a lead singer in Looking Glass. Neither of them thought that they wanted to be the lead singer in this band. And at the time, we also felt that it would be kind of cool to have a couple of chick singers in the band, too. So, and we wanted to have sort of a review, a 6-piece band with 2 girls in front, 3 guys up front, and drums, kind of like, Delaney and Bonnie or something like Eric Clapton might have, something like that. And we auditioned tons and tons of girl singers. They all came out of New York, and some of them were really good, some of them weren't really that good, but they were all kind of, I don't know. So finally one day, the four of us sitting around, and we said, Elliot goes, "Well, I guess I could sing a couple of tunes," and Peter goes, "Well, yeah, I could probably sing a few, So we dropped the 6-piece, 2 girls and 4 guys idea, and we just kept it at the 4 guys that became the band Looking Glass. And we kept the name Looking Glass because Larry said, "Well, if we keep that name, I know I can get us work because people will remember it right away." So we did. So we kept the name Looking Glass, and we started playing all kinds of college gigs once again, and fraternities and bars and down to shore again. And we started at the same time. The other 3 guys in the band, Elliot, Larry, and Peter, had now graduated from Rutgers. I was only a sophomore in college. I'm always a little younger than the rest of them. But we met one day, and we were sitting around, and they said, "Well, we're now graduated. We got a couple of options here. We could really put our minds to making the music thing work. We can, what they ultimately did was move to a farm out in the middle of the country and bear down on it. But they said, we could really put our minds to really crafting our songs and our sound and moving out to the country and really honing our craft. Or we could get jobs or something." Everybody went, "Well, no, not doing that." Took a farm out in Hunterdon County, New Jersey, which is rural, middle of nowhere, 86-acre farm, 200-year-old stone farmhouse that was owned by Mary Chapin Carpenter's Aunt Mary, who lived in Toronto, and we paid our rent pretty much, but we didn't really have that many gigs at that point. We were really working on songwriting, creating a sound, making demo tapes in the dining room, and starting to shop them around to anybody that would listen to us and possibly, entertain or signing us to a record label or something like that. And that went on for a while until we finally found somebody that thought that we were worth taking an interest in and so on.
Because, when you guys were at the farmhouse, were you guys living there as well as making the demos?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we lived, worked, played, slept, and ate, and we were by that point we were pretty much living on food stamps, which was kind of a welfare thing where we were living on food stamps and a couple of gigs a month so we could pay our rent and buy peanut butter and bologna and stuff. All the effort was put in towards songwriting and recording.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you have any memories of recording those? Like, do any memories pop up about recording those demos in the farmhouse?
Oh, sure. We took the dining room and set it up as a kind of a mini studio. Elliot had a Sony 2-track machine that had sound on sound, where you would record everything to one track, and then you could bounce it over to track 2 while you added a new part, and then you could take that and then bounce it back to the original track, wiping out what was there, but taking what you had originally done plus the thing you had added and bounce it back to track 1 and add another part. So we did sound on sound recording to make multi-layer parts. We didn't get too thick on that, but we were able to do more than just one mic in the middle of the room stuff. We actually thought about production a little bit at that point, which really helped out a lot when at much later on when we wound up producing the first album ourselves. We had done it so many times and so many versions. By the time we got to the version that we had already done it like 5 or 6 times, and we kind of knew what we wanted.
I think it was at the farmhouse that Elliot wrote Brandy, and so is that when he kind of showed the band Brandy for the first time?
He had gone out to San Francisco for a couple of weeks, and he got the bones of it together out there. And when he got back, Larry helped him put it all together, and then we finished up the arrangement and did a demo of it.
Yeah, but did you think that it had the potential to be a hit at that time?
Yeah, it was a song that always went over well live. People liked it, so we said, well, that's cool. And we liked it. We thought it was pretty cool. It was just one of many songs that we were working on that seemed to enjoy popular enthusiasm. Here, I'll give you a chronology of how many times we did Brandy. We did it as a demo in our dining room through somebody who we knew that knew somebody. We did a version of it at a demo studio, a Warner Brothers demo studio on Madison Avenue in New York. It was a 4-track studio. We might have done a version of it in that Brooklyn studio too. I don't think so, but it may have. So there's the dining room, there's the Warner Brothers demo studio. We did that recording there is where we found our manager, Mike Gershman, who had partners that had another recording studio up in Saugerties next to Woodstock in upstate New York. We did a version of that there. That was version 3. With that, we had signed now with CBS, and when we signed with Clive Davis at CBS, he thought that he called up Ahmet Erdogan and Ahmet of Atlantic, and he asked Ahmet, who should produce these guys? And they both thought that Steve Cropper should, from Booker T and the MG. So, and then CBS had just paid for a studio for Cropper down in Memphis. So we went down to Memphis to record 4 songs in a master quality version to see how we liked it. And if we liked it, we would have gone back to Memphis and finished up the album. When we were down to Memphis, we did 4 songs. We came back to New York. We listened to it. And, it's not quite what we had in mind. It was good, but it's not quite what we had in mind. It was kind of Memphis-y, too Memphis-y for us. So then there was, so that was version 4 or 5, I guess. I don't know. Then there was a staff producer at CBS who had done many pop records on staff. He's a staff producer. And he said, give me a shot. I can do it. We said, okay. So we went and did another version of Brandy with him, and we recorded the whole thing. And he says, come back in a couple of days. I just want to put a little sweetening on it. Where we thought sweetening was maybe some horn parts or something. We like horns. So we came back in a couple of days from when we did the track. We sat down in the studio, and he put the tape on, and we're sitting there. And all of a sudden, as the tape starts, you start hearing like sounds of like the ocean, like crashing waves, and you hear seagulls. You hear seagulls and foghorns and ship bells, ding ding ding. what the fuck is that? Right? and then the track begin, and Brandy, the track, the music track kind of fades in. He had done other records that he had put sound effects on. And they were big sellers too, like listen to the rhythm of the falling rain by the Cascades and some other stuff, but it wasn't working for us. So now we're up to like version 5 or 6 or something ago. We finally said to ourselves, this is not rocket science, right? Give us a decent studio and an engineer that we can work with, that we can talk to. We'll do it. This is not that tough. So we convinced CBS that this is the way to go, and they gave us the okay. So we found a studio that we could use, Regent Sound up on 57 feet, which happened to be Atlantic Studios. When they had way too many sessions to book, they would use Regent Sound over on 57th Street. And the owner of it, Bob Liftin, he owned the place. He was the engineer. That was what we did like, though, from the Ship's Bells and Foghorn version of Brandy was the groove. The groove was right. So we took the tape from that Ship's Bells version up to Regent Sound, wiped off everything but the bass and drums, and built up from there the version that you heard, including writing the horn parts ourselves. We all took an instrument. I was the baritone sax. Elliot was the trumpet. Larry played the alto sax, and Peter was a trombone. And we sang the parts that we wanted to hear for the horn part. And as we were singing the parts, Larry would transcribe it. We had an arranger come in and transcribe them, and he hired the horn players, and that's the horn parts that you hear on the record. We produced that record ourselves. We wrote the horn parts ourselves, and that's the one that you know as the record that came out.
Yeah, okay. I didn't realize. Wow, that's a really interesting story.
So as Elliot described it, we were completely making it up as we went along. We were feeling our way down the hallway because we had never done this before, other than in either demo versions or, other circumstances. We didn't know what the hell we were doing, but we knew what we wanted to sound like. So what you heard was really what came out of our own heads, and somebody just put it on tape.
The beginning of that song, I think there's a magic to it because, the guitar, the keyboard, and the drums in the intro, they all kind of come together as one. I mean, Was that done on purpose, or did it just happen that way? No,
that's just the way we played it. But within 2 or 3 notes, you know what it is.
That's right, yeah.
Within 2 or 3 notes, as soon as it comes on the radio, within 2 or 3 notes, I know what it is. And it's not just because I've heard it 10,000 times.
And I mean, because I'm not a drummer, but is it a technical song to play at all, or is it like a easy song? Like
No, not really. You got to think of it as, this is an Elliott song, so you got to think of yourself like you're playing in an R&B band versus it's not a rock and roll song per se. We're not playing the Stones. We're playing like, cool R&B. So you approach it the same way. I love playing both kinds of stuff. And like I said, whoever was the songwriter, the same 4 guys. And it came, everything came mushed through that filter, and it came out as what we sounded like.
That session or sessions when you're recording Brandy, was that just for the Brandy single, or was that also for the album? Or how did all that come together?
Well, after we took the tapes from the Ships and Foghorn session, we did 2 records. 2 sides, 2 tracks with that producer. We did Brandy and we did Golden Rainbow with that guy. And we took that track too. And because that one also had a good groove. And we took that one and wiped off everything but the bass drums. And I think we kept the slide guitar, who was a guy who we had hired as a session player from Nashville that did dobro. And we built that one up again ourselves as well. But the version that you heard that was done as one of 8 that were going to be on the album. They were all finished at the same time, except for being Golden Rainbow and Brandy having earlier bed tracks that we kept. Everything else on the record and was built up with those 2 at the same time, and we finished all at the same time.
Yeah, okay. So did it take many sessions to do the album, or did you guys just get in there and do it? How did that happen? Yeah.
Well, we it took about a little less than 3.5 weeks to do, maybe under a month, because we had done it so many times. It wasn't that tough. My parts were done rather early. So my job was to sit in the control room and to listen to what people were playing and singing. You know, I was really kind of the vocal producer in that I knew what everybody's voice sounded like. And when those three other guys were crowded around the mic to sing backup parts, I would say, Peter, move back a little bit, or Larry, move in a little bit, or Elliot, turn silent or whatever, so that the vocals would sound the way that we always knew that they should sound like. And that's one of my jobs, was to be the guy in the booth, because I wasn't the other three guys out in the room playing something or singing or something.
The band kind of produced the record, but I mean, because you had, I think it was the engineer Bob Liftin there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he had done tons of records. This guy was an old pro. And when we finished Brandy, he just jumped up and started yelling, "It's a hit! It's a hit!" and he knew it. He knew it first before us. We took his advice. We took his prediction to heart. We said, you might be right there. When the first album came out, we asked CBS to release "Don't It Make You Feel Good" as the first single, only because it wasn't Brandy, and we'd heard Brandy to death. We'd heard Brandy 5 other times or 6 other times. We were all kind of sick of it, and so we convinced CBS to release "Don't It Make You Feel Good," and it's a stomping rock and roll song. It really is. It's got everything going for it. It's got horns. It's got kick singers in the background. It's just kick ass. And they did. They released it as a single. It wound up selling 500 copies. In the meanwhile, somebody down in Washington, D.C. got a hold of an early copy of Brandy from the album, started playing it. As the story goes, the phones lit up, people calling in saying, "Where can I get this record?" And that's how it broke. So it was really with a DJ in Washington, D.C. that picked it off of an early advanced copy of the record that made that record happen.
May 1972, Brandy comes out as a single, but it's the week beginning August 26, 1972, that Brandy's number one. I mean, what do you remember of being told it went to number one for the first time?
Well, it was interesting when we this tells you where we were at. Last gig that we did before we started doing these various professionally recorded versions of Brandy or any of the recordings. The last real gig that we played wasn't a fraternity house. It was a bar out on Route 1 in New Brunswick called the Triangle Inn. Now, the Triangle Inn was just a roadhouse bar. The owner, Art Dana, took pity on us, and he would book us a couple nights a month because he liked us, but he also wanted to kind of support the band. And it was a good place. We liked playing the Triangle Inn. Years later, it turned into a strip bar, but it tells you the kind of where it was at kind of place. So our last gig, really, before we went into the first of a series of studios to record the first of a series of versions of all of this, was the Triangle Inn. Our next professional gig after that was we were opening for Jeff Beck at Carnegie Hall. So you can imagine. You can imagine for me, I was just as green as the grass. You could have mowed me with a lawnmower. I didn't know anything. I was as dumb as a stump. The last gig I did was a road bar, Central Jersey, and then the next gig I'm doing was opening for Jeff Beck at Carnegie Hall. What the hell did I know? I wish I could go back and play Carnegie Hall again, because now I know what I'm listening for. But back then, I didn't know. So we were and CBS put us with Jeff Beck because we were both on CBS, and we both had records that were just recently released. And they said, "Why don't you go open up for Jeff Beck for a couple of weeks?" Before Brandy was a hit, we were just considered by the public as just a new rock and roll band. They gave us back then all new bands. Public was different. They would give you attention. They would give you some respect. You could go out there and play your stuff, and people would listen to it and say, "That's okay." Well, I used to go to the Fillmore all the time in New York, and if you had some band that you'd never heard of, you would sit there and listen to them, and they'd say, "Oh, that's pretty cool, not so good." But we were just considered just a new rock band that was, now starting out. Once Brandy was a hit, and once we were labeled a pop band, that was it. We were never a rock and roll band again after that, and that was tough. That was very hard to reconcile amongst ourselves, because you're labeled a pop band, and it's much different than being taken seriously as a rock and roll band, which we thought we were, because That's what we thought we won. We went on tour with Jeff Beck for a couple of weeks. Then we started opening up for, other large artists and stuff, and wound up working our way west. We wound up on the West Coast. Did American Bandstand with Dick Clark. We were playing all kinds of gigs, and then there in August, as you said, it turns into #1 around the world. In Guardians of the Galaxy 2, the guy who wrote the movie and directed it told us directly, I based the premise of the movie on your tune. Think about it. The song Brandy's about this guy, he's a sailor, he's got a girlfriend, comes to port, brings her stuff, but at the end of the record, he goes back to sea. And in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, you got this guy, he's a space guy, he rides around the galaxy, he's got his girlfriend at home, but at the end of the movie, where does he go? Back to space. And he says, the premise of the movie is based on your song, and then he plays it like 2 or 3 or 4 times in the movie. It's on the soundtrack. They play it on. We get name checked on screen. By that point, it was just getting a little embarrassing, to tell you the truth. But we thought that was kind of cool. It's not the kind of movie I would go see, but if I'm in it, I love it.
Yeah, I mean, did you end up seeing the movie?
I did. I watched it on opening when the week it came out. The very first thing you hear when the movie opens is us. The downbeat of the record. The movie start, and all the ads are over, all the stuff is over, and the movie starts. The very first sound you hear is my bass drum foot. Because the record, if you listen closely, the one of the first measure is boom, ba-da, it's the bass drum foot. Everybody comes in on the upbeat of 1. Ba-da, that. So the very first sound you hear is my bass drum foot in that movie. And when I started, and again, when I was sitting there in the theater, 2 or 3 notes into it, I go, uh-oh, here we go. And then they played at least 2 or 3 more times throughout the film. We get name checked on screen. There's one scene where the space guy, Kurt Russell, is driving along and he stops the car and he goes and takes a leak in the bushes and he starts whistling my song. Now, when you got Kurt Russell taking a squirt, whistling your song, you're doing good.
Absolutely.
I thought that was pretty damn cool.
You've certainly made it when Kurt Russell, is listening to your song while taking a leak. That's definitely
That's when you know you made it.
The single to follow up Brandy, Golden Rainbow, I think was the follow-up single. I think they only reached 75 or something on the US charts or something like that. I mean, did it disappoint the band at all that the follow-up single wasn't like as big as Brandy? I'm not sure that was the follow-up. I'll tell you what we did. We were a completely democratic thing. We were completely egalitarian. If we put out a single and Elliot's song was on the A side, one of Peter's songs was on the B side. And then the next one that we would release, we flipped it. And Peter's song would be on the A side and Elliot's song would be on the B side. So I don't think the single that followed Brandy was Golden Rainbow, because that's one of Elliot's songs. I think it might have been Jenny Lynn. I have to go back and check. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
We were completely democratic. We did A and B, then flip it over, and then the exact opposite for representation, because we wanted to be totally fair.
Which I think that's probably a very good thing for a band to aspire to do. The year after Looking Glass did their second album, Subway Serenade. I mean, was it a different recording experience recording Subway Serenade to the first album? Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, because Brandy was so successful, we now had a little bit of juice, and we could ask for a few things. The biggest one is that we asked to have Aretha Martin produce us. Now, we are huge Aretha Martin fans. Aretha did all the Young Rascal records. He did Aretha Franklin records. He did Curtis. We were huge Aretha Martin fans. And so we asked CBS, do you think we could get Aretha to produce our second album? So Clive calls up Amit, and Amit says, well, Aretha is a staff producer here at Atlantic, and he gets to do one outside project from Atlantic a year. So in 1973, we were Aretha's outside project. We went over to Atlantic Studios and recorded that record. So Atlantic Studios is at 59th Street in Columbus Circle. CBS headquarters is at 52nd Street and 6th Avenue. And the D train subway goes between the two buildings. And that's why the record's called Subway Serenade, because we were on the D train going between CBS and Atlantic. We recorded it at Atlantic Studio A, which is legendary for who's recorded there and what's going on there. And working with Arif was just a master class in how do you really make a record. You know, working with Arif is not like feeling your own way down the hallway, you know, doing the best you can. Arif was a master of the craft. And what a gentleman, what a nice guy. Unbelievably nice guy. He really pulled it out of us, and I still love that record, that album today. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. I quite like the second album as well, and I mean, in saying that, because I mean, I think that the hit, I mean, the band had a hit off that album, Jimmy Loves Marianne. I mean, did you think that had, because I think it was top 40, it was a top 40 hit or something like that. I mean, did you?
It's up to 33, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when Elliot, because I think it was written by Elliot, I mean, did you think it had potential to be a top 40 hit when you heard it for the first time? Or?
Let me tell you, when we were traveling around the country on tour in support of the second album, we would hear it on the radio as much as, or even more than, Brandy in some markets. It was as big a hit on the airwaves as Brandy, no question about it. And but for some reason, it wasn't selling through, and we started to get upset with CBS. Said, listen, we're hearing it on the radio all the time. People are going crazy when we play it, but we're not selling product. What's the deal? And, you know, they made up some crap-ass excuse because record companies are, you know, who they are. And it really made us quite upset. We thought for sure it could have gone top 10 as well. And I don't know why, but after that, we kind of got disillusioned with CBS. And that. So but we did have some juice after the first album and first single with Brandy that we asked for a couple of things. One was to work with Arif Martin, and two, if we could get a fold-out album cover, which we did. You know, it's got an album cover where you can open it up and have an open up cover. And we wanted that because, you know, if you have a fold-out album cover, then you can clean your pot on it. And it was another mark of success besides, all the other marks of success when you can clean your pot on your own record cover. Then you know you've made it.
Of course.
That's when you know you've made it, is when you can clean your pot on your own record.
I think it was the year after 74. I think Elliot left in 74, left Looking Glass. I mean, what was that like when Elliot left, like for you guys?
So what happened was we were ready to go out on tour for that. Elliot was more and more looking to be more of just kind of a lead singer and play some rhythm guitar, but not like a whole lot. And remember, by being a 50% hard rock band, you wanted hard rock guitar. You know, you wanted somebody to be crunchy and crank it out. Elliot never was a real badass hard rock guitar player ever, but he could play, you know, good stuff. I like Elliot's guitar playing a lot. So we said, you know what, if we're going to really sound like we should on half the songs that we do, we got to get another guitar player. So we hired, out of the back of the Village Voice, we hired Brendan Harkin to go out on tour with us. He practiced with us for a couple of weeks, and then we went out on the road to start touring. Brendan is a really good guitar player. We'll talk about that further in a minute. But Brendan's first gig with us, he practiced for about 2 weeks, and then we went out on the road on tour. His first gig with us was we did the Mike Douglas show in Philadelphia. National TV show, Mike Douglas, Tony Curtis was the co-host. You know, it was a big deal. You know, like a really long national TV show. 2 days later, the next gig we did, we flew out in the middle of Illinois, where we drive out in a bus and a car and a truck. We get out to the middle of Illinois. We're in the middle of a cornfield. We're looking at this huge metal Quonset hut barn, and the place is called the Electric Cow. And the owner comes out and says, "Hi, fellas, you here?" "Yeah, we're here." You know, and he says, "Listen, this is the home bar of two rival bike gangs. So if the lights go out, remember, just hit the floor." So we're playing the first set, we're up there playing, and at one point the lights do go out, and something in the back of my mind says, "Oh, lights out, hit floor." And when I just fell off the back of my stool, hit the ground, and that's when a bottle went whistling where my head would have been and smashed into the wall behind me. So, you know, guys are beat each other up for a while. The lights come on, they throw out a few guys, and we continue on. So a couple of days later, we're in Chicago or something. And I said to Brendan, who has just joined the band, I said, Brendan, let me ask you a question. The first gig you did with us was the Mike Douglas Show, national TV audience. Second gig you did was we were playing the Electric Cow in the middle of Illinois. What'd you think? What were you thinking? He says, well, I just wanted to see what was next.
Yeah.
He just wanted to stick around and see what else we had up our sleeves. So at that point, we finished up that whole tour. Elliot left to go work on his own stuff. Looking Glass still had a whole bunch of gigs booked, and you never give up work. So we put an ad in the back of the Village Voice again. Lead singer wanted, and we hired this. We did a whole bunch of auditions, and we hired a fellow by the name of Michael E. Smith, who was this young guy from the South, from Alabama and Georgia, who came up and he sang phenomenally. He could sing Brandy, almost as good as Elliot could, right? And so we just kept going out as Looking Glass with now Brendan playing the only guitar we had, and Michael Lee singing all the songs and the hits, of course, and everything else. And that went on for almost another year. And we went out under the name Looking Glass. We were still signed to CBS, so we did a couple of singles because under our contract with CBS, but then they didn't really do much, so then they dropped us. At the same time, we were now changing our sound because Elliot wasn't one of the songwriters anymore. It was just Peter and Larry writing songs. So our sound was changing into something much harder, something much rougher, and it got tougher and tougher to keep playing Brandy as such as it was. Finally changed our name to Fallen Angel, signed with Arista Records. Again, Clive Davis. I'm one of the few people who can say Clive Davis signed him twice. And we did another album, a new album with Jack Richardson up in Toronto. A couple of singles were released. Nothing really came of that, and they shelved the album. That band ultimately, through circumstances, morphed into the band Stars, S-T-A-R-Z, where we got a manager whose other band that he was managing at the time was Kiss. We signed with Capitol, and we did 4 albums on Capitol.
Like what are you working on today then in terms of music?
Well, nothing. What Elliot does is he gets invited to play various gigs as Elliot Lurie, and when it's in the New York City area, he calls me up and he says, "Hey, dude, you want to play?" I go, "Sure." How hard is that? How hard is it to play 2 songs? You play Brandy and Jimmy Loves Marianne. If you can't play 2 songs, you stink. So whenever he's in the area and he's doing one of these gigs where he's one of the featured guests, where he comes in and he plays a few, he calls me up and says, "Come play." I go, "Sure."
Well, I just want to thank you for your time today then. I mean, I think we've had such a good conversation and talked about such great things about your music career.
It was fun. I enjoyed telling you a few stories and you bearing with me and listening.
That was Jeff Grob, drummer of Looking Glass. Remember to share this show with other music fans. And if you really like what you heard today, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Vinyl Vibes. And to all you music lovers out there, stay groovy.